What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we're going to get into my top 24 wide receiver rankings. I just hopped out the shower. I had a bloody nose in the shower, so if you see any dried blood on my nose or my nose starts dripping mid-video, it happens to the best of us. I guess I'm kind of prone to bloody noses. I don't know. Maybe I should get that looked into, but I've been getting them my entire life ever since. There's this one time in like 5th grade where I was on the monkey bars doing some stupid shit, fell, bonked my nose. Ever since then, I get bloody noses all the time. All my closest friends know that I get bloody noses constantly. Now, enough of that. Of course, you guys probably could guess a guy who is living in his mother's basement with glasses on probably gets frequent nosebleeds and, other things of that, type of area. Now, with that being said, we do daily fantasy football content on this channel. I'm a little bit behind right now. This video is going to come out a little bit later on than it usually should be. That's my bad. Got caught up in some things earlier on in the week. But I got a banger video coming out for you guys tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. Now, before I keep on rambling, let's get into this. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm pretty cool. My nitty bag.
I snuck in a little water break there for all the guys out there. They get triggered when I do it mid-video, but we're gonna put ourselves in the top right corner, and it's time to get down to business with the tier list. Now, again, I say this every time we do this, but in a second, right? So once I'm done recording this video, it's 5:30 p.m. right now. Once I'm done recording this video, I'm gonna have it like uploading on the side. I'm going to grind out the weekly rankings. I get those out every single Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. So this is kind of just my tiers, just kind of my thoughts for a second. Then I'm going to really grind into it, refine every single one. So if you have two players within the same tier, I don't feel super strongly about it. But if I have two players in separate tiers, then I feel really strongly about it, if that makes sense. Now, all of my tiers, my rankings, all the good stuff on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. It'll be down below in the description. It'll be down below in the comments. It's a really good resource if you want to go out there and dominate your fantasy football leagues. We are going to have, once the season ends, we are going to have a channel in the Discord called the Winner Circle, the Champion Circle. Maybe even, what's the Pokemon? Like not the Final Four, but I don't know. What is it called? If any of you guys are out there, are big Pokemon guys, like when you win, is it like the Winner Circle, right? If you go to like the, I can't remember what it's called. It's like the Final Four, the League of something. I don't know. I can't think of it. But when you win, you get called something. I want to have a channel dedicated to everybody's championship lineups. Now, all right, I'm rambling all over the place today. I told you guys about a story when I was in 5th grade, and now we're talking about Pokemon. But let's get into our S tier, and we're going to talk about Cooper Kupp. Not for too long, though, because this is like, it's almost like, I feel like a broken record at this point. He is that guy. He didn't have a great week this week. The crazy part is he had a quieter week. Here's the thing. It was a disappointing week for Cooper Kupp, and he still finished inside of the top 12 wide receivers in fantasy. He has finished inside of the top 12 in each of his last 6 games at this point. I don't care who he plays. He's playing at home against the Jaguars. This feels like a game where they kind of, take out their frustrations of, losing to the Packers and getting beat up on primetime and all that. I think this is their get-right game. Probably destroy the Jaguars. This could be a Cooper Kupp, 25-point explosion. Side note, also really like Van Jefferson and Odell Beckham as like really nice like wide receiver 3 flex plays. Then our only other wide receiver in this tier, if he was healthy, if he wasn't on a bye, Devontae Adams would be right here. But Tyreek Hill goes into that wide receiver 2 spot, also an S tier. He now has 20-point games or better in 3 of his last 4. He's another set-and-forget-it guy. He's going to be playing at home against Denver on primetime again. Very annoyed with that game because I wanted to see Herbert versus Burrow on that primetime matchup. Happens to the best of us that we're not going to be able to see it, but this is a game where the Chiefs are probably just going to roll right over the Broncos, and Tyreek Hill should be right in the center of it. Then we have A tier, and this is still like elite options at wide receiver, but I think that Tyreek Hill and Cooper Kupp are the only guys you can probably pencil in for 20-plus point games, something in that range. But somebody in probably like the 18-point range, in terms of just like projections, is Justin Jefferson. He's going to be in Detroit, and he is probably going to make an absolute mockery of those boys in Detroit. They have a bottom 5 pass defense per DVOA, and Jefferson's just going to ruin this secondary. Up to this point, he is the wide receiver 5 in points per game behind only, I believe it's Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, Tyreek Hill. Can't think of the last one. If it's Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, Tyreek Hill, maybe it's Devontae Adams in there at wide receiver 4. I could be wrong, though. But Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 5, pretty crazy what he's doing right now. And the other guy I think that belongs in this tier as well, as you know, just like elite options at the top, is also Stefon Diggs. And Stefon Diggs didn't even have a great, a great week last week. He didn't go absolutely bonkers against, I want to say it was the Saints on Thursday, but he now has 6 straight top 24 finishes. And even in a tough matchup against the New England Patriots, he's going to be at home against New England. That's going to be a really good game. I believe that's Monday night. Mark that on your calendars. That'll be a really good game. But Diggs now is playing as the second best pass DVOA defense. And again, he saw shadow coverage against Marshawn Lattimore last week, beat that. I'm not really scared of anybody's corners. I know that New England has J.C. Jackson. They're going to try and limit Stefon Diggs. Still not super concerned there. He's been the wide receiver 6 in points per game on the season. I still feel really confident with him here as a top 5 wide receiver. Now, when we move on from this tier, this is going to be the guys that have really high floors. And I like Keenan Allen here. And I'll be honest with you, as someone that has to sit down and rank these wide receivers every week, the wide receivers give me way more problems than the running backs. Because after these 4, after these 4, it gets really tough on a weekly basis because you can put a lot of guys here. You can put guys like CeeDee Lamb here as high as wide receiver 5. You can put Godwin, Mike Evans if you want. If you still have hope for Jamar Chase, a guy who has been disappointing recently, you can put Jamar Chase here. But I'll put Keenan Allen. We're going to put the highest floors here, guys that have been producing as wide receiver 1s. And Keenan Allen is in my favorite game of the week. Like I was mentioning earlier, Joe Burrow versus Justin Herbert, going to be the shootout of the top quarterbacks from that 2020 class. Yeah, 2020 class. Highest over-under of the week. And this is a game you want to be targeting. You want all the pass-catching options in this game. You want the running backs in this game. And the problem is we say this every time, and the highest over-under of the week sometimes this disappoints, and it can, but we have to listen to what Vegas is telling us, 50.5 over-under. Why not attack it? Now, Keenan Allen, the best thing about him, he sees a ton of volume. He is the wide receiver 6 in expected points per game. Expected points per game is just how many targets are you seeing, how much volume are you seeing, your ADOT. It takes all those factors into account. How many points should you be putting up based on your volume? He is wide receiver 6 in that category. So he sees a ton of volume. He's going to be in Cincinnati. At wide receiver 6, we have another guy who just sees a stupid amount of volume, and that's why I'm comfortable putting him this high, is Diontae Johnson. The wild part about Diontae Johnson is he's higher in expected points per game than Keenan Allen. The problem is the offense is bad, so it's not as efficient, right? So he's not meeting expectations, but he's wide receiver 3 in expected points per game behind only Tyreek Hill and Cooper Kupp. So that's wild. He just saw 36% of the targets last week, and he's just an every week must start. At this point, look, we're going to get into Diontae Johnson. I'm going to be doing the Dynasty rankings tomorrow night. So Friday night, I'm going to do the Dynasty rankings. Remember, check that out on Patreon. But I'm going to go through it all. Diontae Johnson's going to be scary high in my Dynasty rankings. He is now a third-year wide receiver in the same draft class as Terry McLaurin, A.J. Brown, all those good guys, DK Metcalf, and he is, on a weekly basis, the highest-ranked wide receiver. Again, this isn't a Dynasty video, but Diontae Johnson, I don't think you can give me a good excuse why Diontae Johnson should be behind Terry McLaurin, even like a guy like Chris Godwin. Diontae Johnson, I think it's close between those 3, but Diontae Johnson's in that tier. He has made that clear. He needs to be in that tier. So he's going to be at home against Baltimore. Pretty much a neutral matchup. Baltimore's allowing the 17th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. But just because of the volume that he's been seeing, you have to put him, in the top 6 at this point. Now, moving on to C tier. This is where it got really tough for me. These felt really clear, and I know that they're really small tiers. But this is where things got. I could have had like 9 wide receivers in C tier. It was wide receiver, I want to say wide receiver 7 through 14. I almost put in here, but I divided them into 2 tiers. I will say the wide receivers between C tier and D tier, you could combine it if you wanted to. Now, the first guy we're going to talk about is CeeDee Lamb. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't feel great about it. This range is extremely tough for me to rank this week. But I'm going to go with CeeDee Lamb. He plays tonight. He's going to be in New Orleans. And New Orleans is giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. And CeeDee Lamb's coming off a head injury, which means he can't tweak anything. I think that he was trying to play last week. I do think he got the long week because of the Thursday game. I think he is pretty much fine, ready to go. But Cedric Wilson and Amari Cooper are both long shots to play at this point. So either of them could be limited. I think this is going to be the CeeDee Lamb show tonight. Then at wide receiver 8 and 9, I always put these guys together just because on a weekly basis they see the same environment, all that, and it's pretty much a toss-up for who scores more. They're pretty much the same player. And this is a game where they're going to be in Atlanta, and you think, okay, they're going to absolutely obliterate Atlanta. You probably don't want to rely on the passing game. They're probably just going to feed Lenny the whole time. The problem is that they have the highest implied team total with 30.5 points. If the Buccaneers are going to score 30.5 points, they're also in a mindset where they kind of want to pad Brady's stats a little bit and like dismantle teams. So it makes sense to have the wide receivers high, because if they're going to score a ton of points, some of it will come from their wide receivers, not just all of it coming from Leonard Fournette. And on top of that, Atlanta is a bottom 4 pass defense in DVOA. So it's a pretty light matchup. I expect one or both of them to score touchdowns and be, top 12 options this week. Then we have our next tier. And again, I can't stress this enough. I would have kept C and D tier together. I just don't want 10 wide receivers in the same tier. This is just a super small bump to the next tier. And we're going to put at wide receiver 10, we're going to put Jamar Chase. And Chase is really teetering on the edge here, because if he doesn't perform this week, he's got to move lower than wide receiver 10. He has not put up a top 24 finish since week 7. We are now on week 13. He gets one more week, fellas. He gets one more week, because I have such a hard time not ranking him this high, because we've seen what his ceiling looks like. He's a very talented player. It just hasn't panned out the past, it's pretty crazy, but like the last 6 weeks, essentially. I mean, he had a bye week in there, but it's tough. Now he's going to be playing at home against the Chargers. Again, that's the matchup that we've been, salivating over all week, because it's going to be high over-under, shootout potential, all that good stuff. And like I said, if he gives us a another letdown game, and like if T. Higgins like outperforms him again, then Jamar Chase can go down here, T. Higgins can go up here. But we'll hold out faith for one more game. Then at wide receiver 11, we have Hollywood Brown, and I feel really good about Hollywood Brown. He had a down week last week with only 13.1 points, but he's the wide receiver 9 in points per game on the entire season, and they still fed him with 33% of the targets. So he's getting all the volume. He still has all the production on the year. He came back from an injury, still getting all the targets despite injury, despite Rashad Bateman getting into the rotation. And now he's going to be playing on the road in Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh isn't the defense that we thought they were. Pittsburgh is 7th worst in pass defense per DVOA. They're not that good. I could easily see Marquise Brown, breaking one big. Lamar Jackson kind of has a bounce back game after throwing 4 interceptions on a Monday night. I think that this is a game where, Hollywood Brown kind of comes out here and absolutely dominates. Then in the same tier, we have wide receiver 12, Terry McLaurin. And he should probably be higher here, right? I wouldn't hate if somebody wanted to put Terry McLaurin literally at wide receiver 7. I wouldn't scoff at it. Again, I cannot stress enough how close these tiers are for me. The thing about Terry McLaurin is he hasn't been super consistent. He only has one top 24 finish in his last 4 games, but the targets are there. He's 12th in target share. He's going to be playing on the road in Las Vegas. It's kind of a neutral matchup, but I will say Las Vegas's defense has been trash recently. They have allowed 32 or more points in their last 3 games. I don't really expect Taylor Heineke to go out there and light things up, but it could happen. It could happen. The defense hasn't been great. Terry McLaurin could cook. This feels like a decent game for Terry McLaurin. Then at wide receiver 13, we have DeAndre Hopkins. And I fully believe Hopkins returns this week, and I fully believe that Kyler returns this week. Now, I will say, I'm being a little bit conservative here. If DeAndre Hopkins comes down and gives us a wide receiver 1 matchup, then he could be right up here. All he needs is one good week, and he's right here. He's going to be playing on the road against Chicago. Chicago is allowing the 6th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. This should be a layup. Now, I think that Chicago probably slows down the pace a little bit, and it's not going to be a shootout, but I do believe DeAndre Hopkins probably just toys with these corners. Kyler Murray's going to come back. He posted that weird, I think it was like a GIF on his Twitter of like Thanos or whatever. He's going to come out here. He's going to want to go out there and, really perform. My hair's looking really weird out the shower, fellas, but we'll simply gloss over it. Then at wide receiver 14, we have Adam Thielen, who's going to be playing in Detroit. We talked about this with Justin Jefferson with this. Secondary is awful. Adam Thielen now has 2 top 8 finishes in his last 2 games. He's red hot. And I said earlier on in the offseason that his touchdowns weren't sustainable. But I'll say I think that that's a bad narrative now. And we'll in the offseason, I'm going to go over literally every one of my takes and really iron things out and kind of see where we went wrong, where we went right. Now, don't get me wrong. We're in my leagues right now, super profitable. Super profitable. I finished, I got 4 out of my 9 FFPC teams to go into the playoffs, and that is a format where only the top 4 teams make it. So, I mean, if you make that was almost 50% of my league, or almost 50% of my redraft leagues, I made it into the playoffs in a format where only the top 4, so the top 33% make it. So that was really good. But yeah, so with Adam Thielen, I thought the touchdowns weren't sustainable, but they have this weird situation where Adam Thielen right now is first in touchdowns, and he leads the Vikings in end zone targets. He's getting all the end zone targets, and on top of that, this is a very consolidated passing game. So all of the targets are going to Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen, and then the rest. And it's a big chunk of the targets. So when you have a consolidated passing game, and you have a lot of the end zone targets within that consolidation going to one player, that's a pretty good environment for touchdowns to happen. Now, is he outperforming touchdowns by like 1 or 2 at this point? Yes, but he still should be like top 5 in touchdowns with like 8 or 9. He has 10 right now, so I can't really take that away from him. Then we have E tier, and this is, these wide receivers are guys that I don't really know how to feel about. This is actually a pretty fat tier at E tier, but we're gonna put DK Metcalf here, and this is tough, man. This is tough. He's going to be at home against San Francisco. He now has 3 straight finishes outside of the top 50 wide receivers in PPR. He is the Seattle offense is also tough to trust. They have scored 0, 13, and 15 points in those 3 games. They have scored a combined 28 points in their last 3 games. It's an awful environment for fantasy. I don't know what the problem is. I don't know if it's Pete Carroll. I don't know if it's Russell Wilson. But it's ugly. And DK Metcalf can't perform, and he's pretty much a dud away from being in like F-tier wide receiver 20 to 24 territory. But for now, we'll put him at wide receiver 15, and we'll hope that he produces. Now, give me un momento, fellas. But next up, at wide receiver 16, we'll put Jaylen Waddle in here. And guys, I'm really excited about Jaylen Waddle. You guys know me. I wasn't high on Jaylen Waddle coming out. Again, though, I did talk about in top 10 lessons learned. I wasn't super high. I didn't have him as like a top 3 wide receiver, but I had him ahead of Devonta Smith. I want to say I had him ahead of Rondale Moore right after the draft. So I did like Jaylen Waddle because he fits that dynamic beta archetype. And you guys also know I'm very quick to pivot on players. You want to pivot on players. Once they start producing in year 1, I say this all the time, year 1, biggest indicator. I don't care what you did in college. If you come out here and you produce in year 1, I'm down. Jaylen Waddle is out here producing like a man in year 1, man. It's Jamar Chase, and then it's Jaylen Waddle. Jaylen Waddle is really out here doing his thing, and he's going to be at home against the Giants. He now has 28, 26, 19, 28, and 32% target shares in his last 5 games. That's insane. He has 3 top 24 finishes in that span. It's time to put some respect on his name. He is now wide receiver 16 in my weekly rankings. And for whatever reason, the Giants are actually have a pretty solid pass defense with, I guess, like James Bradbury. I want to say Adoree Jackson is there, but I don't think he's that good. I think Xavier McKinney's been okay. Again, I'm not really a defensive guy. I'm not here scouting corners and playing IDP leagues, but I got a little bit of knowledge of what's going on the other side of the football. But with the volume that Waddle has been seeing and the efficiency that he's been playing with and just him being super dynamic, you have to just jam him into your lineups at this point. Now, this is sweet redemption, fellas. Wide receiver 17, Brandon. Great, there's a bug on my wall, but we'll gloss over it. All right, so Brandon Aiyuk, wide receiver 17. He's going to be in Seattle. Now, fellas, it's time to get excited. It's time to get real excited because now Debo is out, and all of us who drafted Brandon Aiyuk, this is our time to shine. Brandon Aiyuk is gone. Debo is gone. Even with Debo in the lineup, he's seen 22, 35, and 23% of the targets in his last 3 games. That's all great volume. That's what he had last year, like a 22, 23% target share, which is perfect. Now with Debo gone, he's going to see more volume, right? More pass attempts, and the unlocked upside that a lot of people are not talking about. The rushing upside. This is a dynamic playmaker. He ran the ball. He did kick returns in college. Super dynamic playmaker. Last year, fun fact, Aiyuk's first ever NFL touchdown was a rushing touchdown. He also had 6 carries for 77 yards and 2 touchdowns as a rookie in his 12 games. A lot of those games were without Debo, and then he would come in, fill in as a running back. Now, he's not going to get the Debo treatment where he gets like 10 carries. He might get like 3 or 4 carries. I'm saying this is in his range of outcomes. He could see somewhere from like 2 to 3 carries, get himself a ton of yards, maybe get a rushing touchdown. I'm saying that's in his range of outcomes. He has that hidden ceiling that a guy, like Metcalf doesn't have a gadget, ceiling where he can like finesse 30 yards and a touchdown on the ground. I'm saying Brandon Aiyuk has that in his range of outcomes. And on top of that, this is a bad pass defense. He's going to be in Seattle. Seattle is bottom 6 in pass DVOA defense. I love Aiyuk this week. I'm praying that we get the Aiyuk that we know. All you guys out there, that have been watching the channel that drafted Brandon Aiyuk. I'm very sorry that it hasn't panned out the way that we wanted it to pan out. But this is time where we can kind of turn things around with Aiyuk. I'm hoping, fellas. Now, at wide receiver 18, another one of my offseason sweethearts, we have T. Higgins, who really came out and performed last week. 6 catches, 114 yards, a touchdown, saw 30% of the targets. He has now finished as a top 25 wide receiver in 4 of his last 5 games, and now he's going to be playing at home against the Chargers. Again, the same game I talked about with Jamar Chase, same game I talked about with Keenan Allen. We want pieces in this game. Shootout potential, Joe Burrow versus Herbert. I like T. Higgins in this game. If he outscores Jamar Chase again, then you can kind of see a little bit of a changing of the guards, but I'm not going to go that far. Now, next up, we have Amari Cooper. And I know I was saying earlier that he's a long shot to play. I'm not sure if he's going to play at this point, but if he does suit up, Amari Cooper has shown that even when he does suit up, or as long as he suits up, he should be fine. He's going to be playing in New Orleans, and I like him as like a back-end wide receiver too. New Orleans allows the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, and as I said, if Amari Cooper is in there, he should be fine. Then we have Tyler Lockett. Just keep an eye on the injury reports if you have him. Now, with Tyler Lockett, he's going to be at home against San Francisco. Now, he has the same thing as Metcalf, where this offense has been terrible. The crazy part is that Tyler Lockett actually hasn't been terrible during these games. He has scored 10 or more points in 3 of his last 4 games during like this offensive slump. So he's actually been pretty good to pay off a little bit, even during this slump. Now, not enough to the point where I'd rank him ahead of DK Metcalf, but I wouldn't be like, oh, Metcalf has sucked, so like put Tyler Lockett like outside the top 25 wide receivers. Lockett's actually been more resistant to this recent slump. Then we have F tier. And I say this every time that we get to F tier, but you can put like any group of wide receivers you really want in this tier. But we're going to start this off with Michael Pittman at wide receiver 21. He's going to be in Houston. Now, I'll admit, Pittman hasn't been great. He hasn't had a top 24 finish since week 9. We're now in week 13. But this is a good matchup, and he just got peppered last week with 10 targets. He's going to be playing in Houston. Houston allows the 7th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. And while I think that they should lean on the run game with Jonathan Taylor, last time they played the Texans, they actually passed the ball more than they probably should have. This could be a game where, Pittman kind of just abuses the secondary. I could see like 4 for 80 and a touchdown. That kind of makes sense to me. Then we have Elijah Moore. First time that I've put him on the tier list. We'll have to see it as a Jets fan, but he's going to be at home against Philadelphia. And I get he didn't produce with Zach Wilson. It's like, okay, he didn't produce with Zach Wilson last week. Why would you put him in this week? The thing is that he just saw a 35% target share with Zach Wilson. So Zach Wilson's still peppering him with targets. Things just didn't connect. And this is a team that passes the ball a bunch. They're like top 5 in neutral pass rate at this point. Matt LaFleur, I love what the plays that he's been calling. I think Zach Wilson's going to settle in a little bit more here. I don't think Philadelphia is a great defense by any stretch. It's going to be at home, at MetLife. We've seen Zach Wilson carve up the Titans at home at MetLife. We've seen him carve up the Bengals. Or no, he didn't carve up the Bengals. Mike White carved up the Bengals. But the Jets are decent at home. All right, they're decent. And this is a neutral matchup. Philadelphia is like about league average in pass D. So I like Elijah Moore this week. He's not going to be a top 24 wide receiver every week, but you're not going to get that consistency from a rookie or really any of these back-end wide receivers for that matter. Then we have Brandon Cooks. Wide receiver 23. He's going to be at home against Indianapolis, and I love wide receivers against Indianapolis for this reason. The Colts are quietly a pass funnel. They are 20th in pass D per DVOA, and they're 3rd in run D. So they're really good against the run. They're not as good against the pass, and they're allowing the 8th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So they're not a bad defense by any stretch of the imagination, but they kind of welcome you to pass the ball the same way the Saints do, but in a little bit quieter. Now with Brandon Cooks, he has 3 top 24 finishes in his last 4 games. He's a fine wide receiver 2 on the week. If you wanted to put him at the top of F tier, I wouldn't blame you for it. Then in this last spot, we have Devonta Smith, and this is narrative-based, and you guys know I'm not a big narrative guy. I literally just listed stats the entire time. I'm a big stat guy, but I firmly believe this. I like this narrative that I've kind of drummed up in my head. But last week, Devonta Smith, right? Eagles, game-winning drive, 2 targets to Jalen Reagor. Jalen Reagor drops both of them, and Devonta Smith is mad. He's like putting on a scene. I think he said something to the media. He was visibly mad. Get me the ball in crunch time, please. And I think this is going to be squeaky wheel treatment. I think that we see a disgruntled Devonta Smith, and then this week against the Jets, kind of a layup game in MetLife. The Jets are the 2nd worst pass defense per DVOA. I expect them to pepper Devonta Smith. I expect them to go out there and say, okay, you're right. We're done giving the ball to Jalen Reagor. We could even see Jalen Reagor take snaps behind J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I think we see Devonta Smith get a ton of targets this week. They're going to want to force feed him the ball. I like Devonta Smith a lot this week as a nice wide receiver 2. Now, that is our final tier list, fellas. Now, as I said earlier, the patrons are depending on me to get them rankings for tonight, so I got to get out of here quick. I love you guys. As always, I will see you guys in the next one. If you want to have access to all of my rankings, that's going to be on Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. As always, subscribe, leave a like, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
I got the juice, I got the juice.
Channel, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper song, singer, suspended, subpoena from Mr. Mean.